The galaxy stretched out in front of them, endless and full of stars. The Galactic Empire had been in power for centuries, controlling all of space with their advanced technology and powerful fleets. Their fleets patrolled every corner of the universe, and their enemies trembled at the thought of defying them. No one dared challenge the Empire. The stars had always belonged to them, and they ruled without question. The galaxy was peaceful, or so it seemed. The planets continued their endless orbits, and the Empire's commanders spoke of glory, victories, and the unstoppable strength of the Empire. Life on the core planets was prosperous. Ships flew smoothly from system to system, and people went about their business without worry. There was no one left to fear. The Empire had wiped out most of their threats long ago. The galaxy was theirs, and everyone knew it. But something was changing. It wasn't obvious at first. At the far edges of the galaxy, beyond the watchful eyes of the Empire, strange things were happening. Distress signals from outlying colonies were being ignored, dismissed as minor disturbances. The Empire had so much power, so many resources, that these small problems were nothing. To them, the outer rim of the galaxy was just a border to guard, not a place where real threats could arise. And so, they continued their rule as if nothing would ever shake their empire. But there was a whisper in the wind. Rumors. Something was out there. A strange, unknown force was making its way toward the heart of the Empire. But no one could have prepared for what was coming. It began on a quiet day like any other. The Empire's command center buzzed with the usual reports. Fleets were being moved around the outer systems, and military drills were underway. Officers went about their business, discussing strategy and the future of the Empire. But beneath it all, there was a growing sense of unease. No one knew why. But there was something in the air. That then came the message. It was a routine transmission from a far-off planet at the edge of the galaxy. The transmission was weak, barely coming through, but the message was clear. We are under attack. The invaders... We can't fight back. Please help us... Double quotes. The Empire's commanders brushed it aside. Another minor rebellion, one of them muttered. Just a skirmish. They were so used to crushing rebellions that it didn't even cause them to blink. But then, the message came again, only this time, it was from another colony, and then another. The reports grew, each one more frantic than the last. The same strange, almost eerie tone. Something was different. Send a fleet, one officer ordered, growing increasingly worried. We need to see what's going on. But even as the command was given, they could feel it, the unease creeping in, growing stronger. But there was more. The fleet sent to investigate returned with something they hadn't expected. Nothing. The entire fleet, destroyed without a single shot fired. No sign of battle. Nothing. Just the remnants of their ships floating in space. Nothing more than debris. Confusion spread like wildfire through the command center. How could this be? The Empire's fleets were invincible. No one could destroy them, not without a fight, not without warning. Yet, the remains of the fleet didn't tell the full story. There was no enemy ship to engage with, no signs of any attack at all. And then, another transmission came through. This one was from a system even further out. And this time, it was a warning. The humans are coming, the message said. The words were strange, unsettling. They are not what you think. They will burn the stars. The message ended abruptly. The room went silent. Everyone looked at each other, unsure of what to think. Humans? One of the officers whispered. They've been nothing but a minor species on the outskirts of the galaxy. How could they? But deep down, something told them that the time of peace was over. The Empire had been unprepared for this. The reports flooded in from every direction, each one a warning that things were about to change. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn a painful lesson. The commander of the Galactic Empire stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out over the vast galaxy they had so carefully controlled. He had always believed that nothing could threaten their rule. They had crushed rebellions, conquered planets, and brought entire civilizations to their knees. The galaxy had been theirs to command, and they had never questioned that. But now, the peaceful calm of the galaxy was beginning to shatter. Something was out there, something that the Empire had never even considered. The commander's eyes narrowed, a feeling of dread creeping up his spine. They were not ready for this. No one could have prepared them for what was about to happen. Humanity was coming, and they were not ready. The calm that had gripped the galaxy shattered like glass. A strange silence filled the air as the Empire's command center buzzed with activity. Reports of attacks, oddities in space, and unexplainable phenomena flooded in, but nothing could have prepared them for what was coming. The first wave of attacks hit swiftly. Systems that had been peacefully under the Empire's control for centuries now found themselves under siege. Entire fleets vanished without a trace, their wreckage left floating in the cold vacuum of space. No signs of enemy ships, no warning shots, only complete annihilation. It was as though the very stars themselves were burning with a ferocity they hadn't anticipated. Across the command center, officers scrambled to make sense of what was happening, but every theory they came up with was quickly shot down. The enemy, whoever or whatever they were, seemed to move faster than any of the Empire's forces. No one could track them, no one could predict their next move. It was as if they were ghosts, a nightmare made real. The panic spread like wildfire. Panic, yes, but not just any panic. It was the kind of fear that only happens when someone realizes they've been living under a false sense of security. The Empire's hold on the galaxy had been absolute, or so they thought. For centuries, no one had dared challenge their might. They had crushed civilizations and reduced planets to ashes. They had erased the memory of any resistance. And now they were losing everything. Inside the command room, the officers were starting to doubt their training, their judgment, everything they believed about their own invincibility. A young officer, once proud and confident, now stood frozen in the center of the room, his face pale. He stared at the screens, his hands trembling. How is this possible? He whispered to no one in particular. How could we not see this coming? His voice broke through the chaos like a sharp needle, and everyone paused to listen. The room, which had been filled with shouting orders and frantic calculations, fell into silence. All eyes turned to the screen in front of them, where another message flickered into view. This one was different. There were no frantic pleas for help. No, this one was direct and cold. It was from a human ship. "We are here," the message read, "and we will burn your stars." The simplicity of the message cut through the noise of the command center like a blade. A message from the very species they had once considered beneath them, and now it was a declaration of war. The young officer's words seemed almost prophetic in hindsight. No one had seen this coming. They had all laughed at humanity's progress, thinking their crude technology and scattered colonies would never amount to much. But now, there was no laughing dot. The Empire's leaders met in a hastily called emergency meeting. The vast halls of the Imperial Palace, which had once echoed with the voices of commanders planning conquests, now felt eerily quiet. The faces of the most powerful individuals in the galaxy were lined with worry, their minds racing as they tried to come to grips with the impossible situation they now found themselves in. How could they have advanced this far? One of the generals demanded, his voice thick with disbelief. "We've monitored their progress for centuries. We have controlled them, kept them at bay. How is it that they suddenly possess such power?" "It's not possible," another commander interjected, shaking his head. "Their technology, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's as if they've jumped ahead by centuries in a matter of years." The Imperial advisors and military experts exchanged glances, all of them thinking the same thing. This was no simple rebellion. This was an entirely new kind of war, one they had never been prepared for. The Empire had underestimated humanity for too long. They had seen them as nothing more than an afterthought, a minor threat to be squashed easily. Now, humanity had risen up and delivered a crushing blow to their confidence. On the edge of the galaxy, the human fleet had already begun its advance. Ships unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered glided through the stars, sleek and deadly. Their design was alien to the Empire, and their speed unmatched. No matter how many ships the Empire sent to intercept them, the humans always seemed to be one step ahead. The human ships did not fire indiscriminately. Instead, they moved with a precision and purpose that the Empire's fleets could not match. Their tactics were as if they were playing a game one that the Empire wasn't even aware of until it was too late. Entire fleets were wiped out without a single shot being fired by the humans. Instead, they simply rendered the Empire's ships useless with a precise strike to their core systems, leaving them to drift helplessly in the void. As the human ships drew closer, the commanders of the Empire knew the truth. Their might had always been built on a foundation of fear, but fear was no longer enough. The galaxy was changing, and the Empire, in all its glory, had been blind to it. Back at the Imperial Command Center, the officers had begun to realize the enormity of the situation. They weren't just fighting for control of the galaxy, they were fighting for their very survival. The Empire had built its entire legacy on its ability to dominate, to instill fear in every corner of the galaxy. But now, that fear was being turned against them. "We've lost the advantage," one of the senior officers said, his voice heavy with the weight of the words. Humanity is no longer the insignificant species we once thought them to be. They've already won the first battle, and now they will burn our stars. The room went silent. The truth hung in the air like a thick fog. The Empire had lost. They had been caught off guard, and now they would pay the price. As the final reports came in, confirming the total destruction of another fleet, the officers of the Empire understood something they had never thought possible. The Empire was no longer in control. Humanity had arrived, and they were ready to burn everything down. The vastness of space had never seemed so oppressive. The once unstoppable Empire, with its fleet of invincible warships, was now on the defensive. Humanity's arrival had shattered their false sense of security. What had started as a minor inconvenience now threatened to upend everything the Empire had built. No one had predicted this. No one had expected humanity to strike back with such force. The human fleet was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Their ships were smaller, but they were too fast. They darted through the stars like shadowy phantoms, striking swiftly, and retreating before the Empire could react. The Empire's commanders, confident in their superior firepower and technology, quickly realized that this new enemy wasn't going to fight by the rules. They were relentless, unpredictable, and efficient. Each time the human fleet attacked, the Empire's defenses crumbled. They had prepared for war, yes, but they had prepared for a war against other superpowers, not against a species that had been underestimated for so long. The first battle took place near the outskirts of the Empire's capital system, where a small human battalion crippled an entire Imperial fleet. It wasn't just the loss of ships that stunk, it was the humiliation. The humans had outwitted them, using tactics the Empire had never even considered. Reports from the front lines were grim. The human ships weren't engaging in full-scale battles. Instead, they struck at key points: communications hubs, energy systems, anything that could disrupt the Empire's infrastructure. Each blow was calculated, methodical, and devastating. The Empire's once pristine star systems began to show signs of strain. Resources were running low, and panic spread like wildfire across the Empire's high command. In the heart of the Empire, the Galactic Council convened in an emergency session. The usual calm and order were gone. Faces once filled with confidence now displayed unease, even fear. They had been the rulers of the galaxy for so long that the idea of an outside force threatening their dominance seemed absurd. But now, the threat was undeniable. "What are we dealing with here?" asked High General Theron, his voice rough, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. "This isn't a rebellion. This is something else." One of the younger commanders, Lieutenant Vela, spoke up. "We've analyzed their tactics. They're not attacking us head-on. They're sabotaging our infrastructure, isolating us, making us weaker one system at a time." The older officers exchanged uneasy glances. "And we can't even track them," General Theron muttered. "Every fleet we send to engage them is either destroyed or left stranded." "Stranded," Vela repeated, her eyes scanning the room. "Exactly. They're not fighting us the way we're used to. They don't care about a direct confrontation. They're dismantling us piece by piece." The council room fell silent. As the weight of Vela's words sank in, the Empire was being torn apart, not through brute force, but through precision. The humans weren't just fighting a war, they were waging a surgical strike against everything the Empire stood for. "How did they do this?" Theron asked, his voice quiet. "We've watched their progress. They shouldn't be capable of this kind of coordination. Where did this technology come from?" A hushed murmur passed through the room. The answer was clear, even if no one dared to say it aloud. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed as a minor force in the galaxy, a species still trying to find its place. The Empire had thought that humanity was just a distant memory, a forgotten race hiding on the fringes of space. But now, the humans had revealed their true strength, and it was terrifying. The Council, desperate for a solution, debated wildly. Some called for a full-scale assault to annihilate the human fleet. Others suggested an immediate ceasefire, hoping to negotiate peace before more damage was done. But no matter the argument, one truth remained: the Empire had lost control. Back on the front lines, the Empire's forces were in disarray. The humans continued their relentless advance, and every attempt to stop them was met with failure. The speed and precision of the human ships left the Empire reeling, and what was worse, the humans seemed to know exactly how to play the Empire's weaknesses against them. Their ships moved like lightning, darting from one location to the next, leaving behind only destruction in their wake. As the days passed, the Empire's commanders struggled to comprehend how this was happening. How could they have been so blind? How could they have ignored the potential threat humanity posed? The Empire had always been proud of its superiority, but now, it seemed as though that pride was its greatest weakness. One such commander, Captain Valor, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the wreckage of his fleet. His ships were scattered, broken, and crippled. The humans had struck again, and this time, they had taken down his command vessel. He was lucky to still be alive. We were so sure, he muttered to himself, the weight of defeat pressing down on him. So sure we were invincible. The screen in front of him flickered to life, and a voice echoed from the communications panel. It was a human transmission, clear and calm. Captain Valor, the voice said. We told you we were coming, and now we're here. The message ended, leaving the captain with nothing but silence. He knew then, in that moment, that the Empire's reign was over. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. It wasn't just the Empire's fleets that were falling. The very foundation of the Empire, its sense of invulnerability, was crumbling. The humans were tearing apart everything the Empire had built, and they weren't showing any signs of slowing down as the human ships continued their relentless assault. The people of the galaxy began to watch. Those who had once lived in fear of the Empire's rule now saw a glimmer of hope. They knew the tide was turning, that the balance of power was shifting. The Empire was no longer the unchallenged force it had once been. Humanity had arrived, and they were burning the stars. The Empire's defenses were stretched to their breaking point. The once mighty fleet that had patrolled the galaxy, its commanders arrogant in their certainty of victory, now floundered in the wake of humanity's relentless assault. The human ships, fast and deadly, moved with precision, unpredictable, almost ghost-like in their ability to strike and vanish without a trace. No matter how many fleets the Empire sent to fight back, the humans always seemed one step ahead. The Galactic Council had convened again, but this time, there was no arguing, no debating strategies. The once proud leaders of the Empire sat in grim silence, the weight of their own mistakes hanging heavily in the room. They had not only underestimated humanity, they had failed to recognize the brilliance behind their enemy's strategy. Each attack has been surgical, General Kirk remarked, his voice raw with frustration. They're cutting us apart, piece by piece, and we can't even figure out how they're doing it. The council members shifted uncomfortably, each one silently agreeing. The images on the large holographic table showed the destruction of more fleet-scratched ships, entire battalions wiped out in a matter of hours. The flames of their destruction, a stark reminder of the power humanity now wielded, and all of this had happened without any clear warning, without the Empire ever seeing it coming. They've been planning this, Commander Varen said, his fingers drumming on the table nervously. But we thought they were still primitive. It's not just their technology, it's their tactics. They've outsmarted us. The other council members exchanged uneasy glances. No one had expected the humans to be capable of such a coordinated and strategic assault. Humanity had always been seen as a mere nuisance, a species that scraped by in the corners of the galaxy, never able to challenge the dominant powers. Yet, here they were, an enemy far more dangerous than anything the Empire had encountered. Before, the humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to conquer, and the Empire, despite its power, had become the prey. Get the fleet to the outer rim, Kale ordered, his tone rising with a hint of panic. We need to regroup, we need reinforcements. If we don't stop them now, there won't be an Empire left to defend. Varen's face darkened. We can't send any more fleets. Every time we do, they're decimated. They're too fast, too efficient. It's like they're playing a different game altogether. One of the council members, an older man named Chancellor Oris, stood slowly. His gaze was somber, his mind clearly racing with all the implications. Perhaps it's time to consider another course of action. This war isn't one we can win through force alone. It's time for a change in strategy. It's time for diplomacy. There was a pause. The other council members, once skeptical of the notion, now watched Oris with new interest. If anyone in the Empire had the experience to broker peace, it was him. He had been around long enough to understand the subtle intricacies of politics, how to outmaneuver an enemy when all seemed lost. But Varen, as always, was quick to dismiss the suggestion. Diplomacy, he snapped. We're being annihilated. How can you suggest diplomacy when they've already destroyed half of our fleets? How can we talk to them when they're coming for us with everything they've got? Oris's expression remained calm, despite Varen's anger. Because we're running out of options. We need to understand them, to see what they want, not just fight back blindly. If we can learn what drives them, perhaps we can find a way to make them stop. This isn't just a military conflict, it's about survival. Yes, but also about what we're willing to sacrifice to keep our dominance. The room went quiet, and for the first time, the council began to feel the weight of their choices. They had been so confident in their ability to control everything, had assumed their power would last forever, but now, everything was in question. Could the Empire be saved? Was there a chance for peace, or had they already passed the point of no return? The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the silence. A young officer, breathless from running, entered the room with an urgent report. He approached the table, looking directly at General Kale. "Sir, we've intercepted a message from the humans. It's a direct communication." Kale's eyes narrowed. "What do they want?" The officer hesitated before speaking, his voice shaky. "They're offering us peace, a ceasefire. They say if we agree to their terms, they will stop their assault." The room erupted in a mix of disbelief and confusion. "A ceasefire?" Varkan scoffed. "After everything they've done to us, they expect us to just stop fighting." "But me see the message," Kale said, raising his hand for silence. He motioned for the officer to display it on the holoscreen. The words appeared, cold and clear. "You have two choices. Surrender or watch as we continue to dismantle your empire piece by piece. Your dominance is over. Your future is in our hands. The galaxy will belong to humanity, one way or another. We will spare those who kneel. The rest will burn. The rest will burn." The council's faces turned pale as the final words sank in. The humans weren't offering peace in the way they expected. It wasn't a diplomatic ply, it was an ultimatum. Humanity had no intention of stopping until the Empire was broken, until it was either crushed or forced to submit. The silence in the room was deafening as they all processed what had just been said. The Empire was at a crossroads. They could either accept the harsh reality of humanity's rise or face the annihilation of everything they had built. It wasn't just a war for survival now, it was a war for the very soul of the galaxy. And with each passing moment, the Empire's grip on the decision had been made, and it wasn't one taken lightly. The Empire's leaders gathered in their war room, the air thick with tension. Each member of the council sat in silence, eyes fixed on the central holotable that projected the galaxies, map now dotted with scars of conflict. Humanity's message still echoed in their minds, a cruel reminder of their precarious position. "Do we accept their terms?" General Kale's voice was filled with frustration, a rare crack in his usually composed demeanor. "Or do we stand and fight? Can we even fight anymore? We're stretched too thin, and every fleet we send is destroyed." A quiet murmur rippled through the room, but no one had an answer. The weight of the situation was too great, and the implications of each choice were staggering. To surrender would mean admitting defeat, relinquishing the Empire's centuries-long reign over the galaxy. It would be an irreversible acknowledgement that humanity had bested them, but to fight would mean continued destruction, perhaps even the end of everything they had known. Chancellor Orisk, the most seasoned member of the council, finally spoke up, his voice calm but filled with an authority that seemed to carry years of wisdom. "We are at the edge of a precipice, and the path before us is unclear. To refuse their terms may very well result in the end of the Empire, but to agree is to acknowledge our defeat. There is no easy choice, only the consequences of whichever path we take." The silence in the room deepened. Outside, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The once sturdy foundations of the Empire were crumbling, but none of them had expected the collapse to come from such a force. Humanity, a species they had once seen as beneath them, now stood poised to reshape the galaxy on their terms. The council members exchanged wary glances. The truth was undeniable. Humanity was not just a threat, they were the future. Every tactical advantage the Empire had relied on its size, its technology, its fleets had been neutralized. The humans had mastered a kind of warfare the Empire had never prepared for, and now, with a few carefully placed strikes, they had dismantled entire fleets, shattered imperial strongholds, and sent shockwaves through the very fabric of the Empire. "I won't beg," Kale finally said, standing up, "but we can't afford to fall, not yet. Not without every last attempt to save this Empire." His eyes burned with determination. A man who had seen too much to surrender without a fight. "We will gather what we have left. Every warship, every soldier, will make a stand." Varun, ever the strategist, shook his head, his voice tense. "But against what?" "Against ships that can outmaneuver us at every turn. Ships that can destroy us without us even knowing where the strike came from. We're not fighting an army anymore, Kale. We're fighting ghosts." Kale's expression darkened. He knew the truth of what Varun was saying, but to hear it aloud made it feel like a death sentence. The Empire had always prided itself on its military might, but now, with each devastating loss, that pride seemed less and less meaningful. The cold, stark reality was that humanity had something far greater: the will to win, the ingenuity to adapt, and the ruthlessness to do whatever it took to succeed. And it wasn't just their ships that made them dangerous. The humans had something the Empire had forgotten about. While the Empire's vast and sprawling bureaucracy had long been fractured by greed, corruption, and infighting, humanity had come together as one. It was that singular focus, that strength of purpose, that had allowed them to weather the storms and rise against the odds. The Empire had underestimated the resolve of a people who had been forced to fight for survival in the depths of space. As the council members sat in a tense silence, the holotable flickered and another transmission appeared. It was from the human fleet, the same hauntingly calm voice, now more direct. "We have given you a choice. The galaxy will belong to humanity. Whether you surrender or resist, the choice is yours. But know this: every moment you delay will be another moment we use to dismantle your empire piece by piece. We are not asking for your submission. We are demanding your compliance." The message ended, leaving behind an uncomfortable, suffocating stillness. It was clear now humanity wasn't just fighting for control. They were asserting their place as the new rulers of the galaxy. They were no longer the weak species on the periphery. They had become the conquerors. "We have no choice," Varen muttered, his voice tinged with bitter resignation. "We can't beat them. They've won." A wave of frustration and despair rippled through the room, but it was quickly followed by something else: realization. They couldn't win this fight by conventional means. They couldn't simply overpower humanity. The humans had outpaced them in every way. But the Empire still had one thing humanity did not: a vast network of loyalists scattered across the galaxy. If they couldn't fight humanity head-on, they would need to fight a different battle, a war of influence, of espionage, of covert action. Chancellor Oris leaned forward, a glint of thought in his eyes. "Perhaps there is a way," he said slowly, "but it won't be easy. We must find those who remain loyal to the Empire and rally them. We may not have the strength to fight humanity with fleets, but we can fight them with something more: insidious information, sabotage, covert strikes. We will turn humanity's own tactics against them." The room quieted again as the weight of his words settled in. A war of shadows, of secret wars, fought far away from the prying eyes of the battlefield. It was a strategy the Empire hadn't used in centuries, but perhaps, just perhaps, it could buy them the time they needed. Humanity had proven their power, their determination, their might, but the Empire wasn't ready to give up just yet. They would adapt, fight smarter, and make humanity face a truth they hadn't prepared for. No empire, no matter how broken, would surrender without a fight. And the real war one fought in the shadows was just beginning. The stars above the Empire's capital system had never seemed so distant. What had once felt like an unshakable rule was now a fragile illusion, teetering on the edge of collapse. The decision had been made, and it was as if a dark cloud had settled over the galaxy. The Imperial war machines had been sent into retreat, not through defeat in battle, but through the gnawing realization that they could not win. Humanity had pushed them into a corner, and there was no way out. The Empire, the proud rulers of the stars, had been built on the foundation of their military might, technological supremacy, and unyielding will to dominate. Now, all of that was being questioned. Humanity had proven itself capable of much more than anyone had dared to imagine. Their technology had disrupted the Empire's defenses. Their strategies had dismantled fleets without so much as a blow. The Empire's leaders had no idea how to handle an enemy that didn't follow the rules of war. And even worse, the ability to stay hidden, to strike and retreat without leaving a trace, had turned the tide in ways the Empire's commanders could never have predicted. It wasn't just their physical strength that had brought the Empire to its knees. Humanity's psychological warfare was just as powerful, if not more so. They had systematically eroded the Empire's sense of security. Each attack, no matter how small, had left a deep scar on the Empire's confidence. It was no longer about winning battles, it was about the slow, relentless destruction of the Empire's spirit. In the command center of the last remaining Imperial fleet, the officers could hardly believe their eyes. They watched in stunned silence as the latest transmission from the human fleet flickered on the holoscreen. The message was simple, yet chilling in its finality. "This is your last warning. The choice is still yours. Surrender, or face the destruction of your empire." They had been receiving these messages for weeks, each one growing bolder, more direct, and more confident. The humans were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were making their presence felt in the very heart of the Empire, and they were showing no signs of slowing down. The once proud fleet was now reduced to a fractured shadow of its former self, with its commanders torn between the desire to fight and the fear of utter destruction. General Kale, the leader of the Imperial forces, stood silently in front of the holotable. He stared at the message, his mind racing. Every part of him wanted to believe there was still a chance, that they could regroup and fight back, but deep down he knew the truth. The Empire had already lost. It was only a matter of time before humanity completed the destruction they had begun. The question now was, what would become of the Empire? "We can't keep running," Kale finally said, his voice filled with a strange mixture of anger and acceptance. "They're toying with us. We don't even know where they're striking next. The moment we react, they're already gone, leaving us with nothing." One of the younger officers, her face a mask of fear, spoke up. "General, we can still regroup. We can still know," Kale interrupted. "We're fighting ghosts. This isn't a war we can win with our fleet. This is a war of attrition, and humanity has already proven they can outlast us." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. The once mighty empire, built on conquest and bloodshed, had been reduced to a fractured, bleeding entity. Their invincible warships, once feared across the galaxy, were now no match for humanity's cunning and relentlessness. They were no longer the hunters, they had become the hunted. In the command room, a figure stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. It was Chancellor Oris, his face more lined with worry than Kale had ever seen. His voice, usually calm and authoritative, now carried the weight of someone who had seen the inevitable coming for far too long. "There may still be another way," Oris said, his tone deliberate. "We can no longer fight them in the open. We've tried that, and we've failed. But we still have something humanity doesn't have: a vast network of loyalists, hidden far across the galaxy. We've built the Empire on secrecy, on our ability to control those who work for us without them knowing they're part of something larger. This war can still be fought on that level, not through fleets, but through intelligence, sabotage, and subversion." Kale turned to face Oris, his brow furrowing. "You want to fight them with spies, with sabotage? We've already tried everything else. What makes you think this will work?" Oris didn't flinch. "Because the one thing humanity doesn't have, at least not yet, is unity. Yes, they have the strength to strike down our fleets. Yes, they have the power to take our planets. But they don't have the years of subterfuge, the deep-rooted network we've spent centuries building. They might control the battlefield, but we can control the shadows." Kale was silent, considering the idea. The humans had been decisive, taking advantage of every weakness the Empire had shown, but they weren't omnipotent. If there was one thing the Empire still had, it was the ability to work from the shadows, hidden, strategic, and cunning. It wasn't the kind of warfare the humans had fought so far, but it could be their only chance. "It's a long shot," Kale said after a long pause, "but it may be our only shot." A plan began to form, a new kind of warfare that would shift the battleground away from the open void of space and into the quiet, unseen recesses of the galaxy. It would be a fight for survival in the places no one could see, a war of whispers and hidden alliances, where every piece of information, every secret, could be the difference between life and death. And so, as the last remnants of the Imperial fleet pulled back into the shadows, the real war began. Humanity had made its presence known, and the Empire had no choice but to adapt. The battle wasn't over, it had only just begun. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever, and the outcome uncertain. Would the Empire's cunning be enough to survive? Or had humanity already won the future? The tension in the galaxy had reached a fever pitch, and the last remaining remnants of the Empire were scattered across its vast territories, retreating into the dark corners where they thought they might regroup. Every day, humanity's fleet advanced, their strategy methodical and relentless. The once indomitable power of the Empire now lay in shambles, and every move made by its leaders was an attempt to hold on to a piece of the shattered glory they had once known. General Kale stood on the bridge of what was left of the Imperial flagship, his gaze fixed on the void of space ahead. He had seen countless battles, but nothing like this. This wasn't a fight for land or resources, it was a fight for the soul of the galaxy. The Empire had lost its ability to control its fate, and it had to find a way to claw back whatever it could. The humans had beaten them at their own game, and now, they had to fight in a way that had never been seen before. The message from humanity was still fresh in his mind. It wasn't the first time they'd heard it, but this time, it felt different. You have a choice: surrender, or burn with the rest. Humanity wasn't playing by the rules anymore. They weren't just conquering, they were erasing the very idea of the Empire, rewriting the future in a way that would leave no room for the old order. We've reached the edge, Kale muttered to himself. This is it. We either make our stand, or we fade into nothingness. Around him, the officers and soldiers who had once marched proudly under the banner of the Empire now looked like shadows of their former selves. Their uniforms, once crisp and regal, were now dirty and worn, reflecting the despair that had settled deep into their hearts. The Empire had fought countless wars, but none had prepared them for this, a war of annihilation. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound, a stark contrast to the frantic energy that had once filled this place. The fleet had dwindled to a handful of ships, and those few remaining vessels were damaged, their weapons systems ineffective against the humans' advanced technology. Humanity had figured them out, broken them, and now they had no choice but to submit or fight to the last breath. General, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Valeher, face as resolute as ever, though the weariness was clear in her eyes. The fleet has gathered. What are your orders? Kale turned to face her. Her loyalty had never wavered, but he knew the doubt that had crept into her heart. We're not retreating, Kale said, his voice strong but tinged with uncertainty. We'll fight one last time. We'll use everything we have left. If we can't defeat them, we'll at least make them regret ever thinking they could destroy us. Valeher nodded, though her eyes betrayed the struggle inside her. She had been with Kale from the beginning, and she had seen what the Empire was, capable of what it used to be, but now, even she had to admit that they were losing. Humanity had a fire in them that the Empire had never known. It was not just their strength or technology, it was their unyielding belief in their right to rule the galaxy, a belief that Kale knew all too well. It was a force that couldn't be stopped by mere ships or soldiers. It was something deeper, something that had been born from humanity's trials and struggles over centuries. We've already lost so much, Valeher said quietly, almost as if she was speaking to herself. How much more can we afford to lose? Kale didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the dark stretch of space, where the last of their fleet was positioned. We'll make them remember, he said with a cold resolve. Even if it's just for a moment. We'll show them that the Empire isn't dead. We'll remind them that it's not the strength of the fleet that matters, it's the strength of the will behind it. As the last remnants of the Empire gathered in space, the humans were already closing in. Their ships, sleek and powerful, moved through the darkness like a swarm of predators. Each ship was more than just a weapon, it was a symbol of humanity's rise. They had come to dismantle the Empire not just through brute force, but through an ideology that had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. A new order was being born, and the Empire had no place in it. Prepare to engage, Kale ordered, his voice steady. He turned to face his officers, who stood with their backs straight, eyes fixed on their commander. For a moment he saw the flicker of something in their expressions, a glimmer of hope, however faint. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The ships of the Imperial fleet aligned, their weapons ready, engines humming with the promise of one final strike. Kale knew that this would be their last stand. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about showing humanity that they had not been defeated yet, that the spirit of the Empire still lived on, even if only for a moment. The human fleet approached, their ships gleaming with deadly efficiency. Kale's heart pounded as he watched them draw closer, the countdown to battle beginning. In the distance, a massive human warship appeared on the horizon, a symbol of everything they had lost. It was a silent, deadly reminder of the power they were up against. We fight until the end, Kale said, more to himself than anyone else. We fight until there is nothing left but ashes. And as the final battle began, the stars above seemed to fade, swallowed by the darkness of space. The once proud Empire, now reduced to a handful of ships, faced its inevitable fate. The humans had won, the Empire had lost. But in that last, fleeting moment, there was still the fire, the belief that they had been something great once and that they would be remembered. For even in their defeat, the Empire's legacy would live on in the minds of those who had once feared it. And so, the galaxy watched as the final battle raged, knowing that this was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter.